Please note that the views expressed on this program are those of the individuals who speak them, and not necessarily those of Portsmouth Community Radio, its Board of Trustees, members, volunteers, or underwriters. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willie Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown, where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness, where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. Okay, good evening once again, and welcome to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. This is the show where the paranormal becomes the normal. I am your host, Willie Hassell, your gatekeeper to the dark side, your guide to the realm of the unknown, the unseen, the unthinkable. And yes, there she is, the lovely, the mysterious, the mystical Lynn Nickerson.
Well, that's quite an introduction. How are you doing tonight, Willie?
I am doing good. How are you doing?
Great.
Did you have a good week since last week?
Yeah, not bad. I could have used a little more sunshine, though.
Well, you know, we all could use a little more sunshine now and then.
I've seen some good UFO videos, too.
Ooh, good. Mm-hmm. Cool. I like that.
Mm-hmm. I'll share the link with you.
Are we going to show them on the program?
Sure. Yeah. This is visual. Yeah, why don't we do that?
I see the camera. It's right up here. You know? I mean, if I can see it, why can't everybody else? Should I just shut up and introduce our guest, you think?
Well, I think
that'd be a good idea.
I think the listening audience would like to know who's on tonight.
Okay. They don't want to hear me babble anyway, so. Okay, tonight we would like to welcome back to the show, once again, Chuck Creteau and Stephen Matherlees. Chuck has been a licensed private investigator and with an associate's degree in law enforcement and a BA in criminology. He is currently employed as a licensed social worker. Chuck has also traveled as far away as Mexico and Washington State to visit UFO-related locations such as Chichen Itza and the famed Isetti Ranch in Trout Lake, Washington. Since the age of 11, Chuck has had a keen interest in UFOs and is currently the organizer of Social Sources at the KRA Center in Stratham, New Hampshire. And Stephen Matherlees is the author of 2 books, one being the thought-provoking Who the Bleep Designed Us. Man, I got to tell you, Stephen, I love that title. In it, Stephen explores new ideas about our origins in light of the latest discoveries in psychics, bioengineering, evolutionary theory, cosmology, and mind research. Stephen presents a persuasive case for extraterrestrial involvement in the design of human DNA. So why don't we now welcome to the show Chuck and Stephen.
Thanks for having us.
And welcome.
Welcome, both of you.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad you are here. Otherwise, we'd just be sitting here talking to ourselves again.
Yeah, this is a pleasant change, isn't it, Willie?
It is.
It's always fun to have somebody in the studio. It makes it a bit more dynamic.
It is, yeah. You know, I mean, phone interviews are great, but the in-studio is just nice.
Well, Stephen, yeah, I've read your book and I just love it. And first of all, what is the name of your second book? We don't have that.
It's called Extraterrestrials. They Are Here Now. And it's time we started talking about them and to them.
And to them.
To them.
Oh, I like that. Well, maybe we can get into that more toward the end of the show.
Okay.
I'd like to know right off how it is you got involved. Like, did you start seeing UFOs when you were a child?
I have no memory of that. I just started to get more and more interested. I was a big science fiction fan. And some of the authors like Heinlein and David Brin and Peter Hamilton, Catherine Assaros, all of those people just are very persuasive about, not persuasive exactly, but make it very believable that we're not alone here. And then I started to take an interest in who was talking about it and where. And I started going to conferences.
Oh, did you?
I went to the MUFON conference in Denver.
At what point, though, did you start this interest?
Well, it's been growing on me for the last probably 20 years.
Oh, okay.
And I started going to conferences about 10 years ago, the MUFON conference in Denver, and then I went to the International UFO Conference in Nevada twice, and met many of the more important people in the field.
Did you meet Stanton Friedman?
Yes, I actually had dinner with him one night.
Did you really?
4 of us took him to dinner, and we had a great conversation.
Oh, I bet he's a wealth of information.
And I understand he's sick now, though.
Well, I guess he just had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, supposedly he's recovering. He's doing better.
Hopefully. And I met him and Edgar Mitchell, Robert Dean, Jim
You met Bob Dean?
Yeah.
Now that I didn't know. That's a nugget of information.
He's a really
quite a gentleman, isn't he?
Isn't he? Yeah.
Knowledgeable, and he was supposed to be the government's quintessential remote viewer. He's still around, isn't he?
As far as I know,
to my knowledge, yeah.
Yeah.
But you've met all these people.
Yes, and Jim Sparks, who wrote the book The Keepers.
I haven't heard of that.
And his experiences are very detailed and legitimate sounding, and they taught him how to read and write their language, the group that he contacted. So that was really interesting, and he was kind of dragged kicking and screaming into the whole thing, and he's one of the very few people who seems to remember in complete detail the whole experience.
Wasn't his story really around, initially he was terrified?
Yes.
And then it wasn't until he finally started to kind of give in and not be afraid that they were like, oh, well, it's about time, I think was the exact quote.
Yes, pretty much that, yeah.
And his first name is Stephen Sparks?
Jim Sparks.
Jim Sparks.
And I met him too. He had he gave a talk, and he had a table at the conference where he was available to talk to people. So I had a chat with him. So these are great conferences if you can get there. They're in Phoenix these days, not Nevada.
Oh, good. There was one here in Portsmouth around 1995. It was pretty much international. It was a really good one. I met Colin Wilson. Wilson? Yeah.
Yes.
Is that his first name, Colin?
Colin, yes. Colin
Andrew
Wilson.
Collins or?
Colin.
Colin Wilson. Okay. The one on the crop circles. I met him and talked to him. Yeah, he was great. The conferences are wonderful. So what species was Sparks connecting with?
Honestly, I can't recall. It's a couple of years since I read the book, and it's just, Chuck, do you?
I have not read his book. I'm just somewhat familiar with
I'll lend it to you.
I definitely like to hold a copy of that.
That's a very fascinating book. And I guess another guy that I've met is Richard Dolan.
Oh, yes.
Who had spoken at the Exeter UFO Festival.
Well, he's scheduled again this year. I don't know if it's going to take place, but...
I got to hang out with him for about an hour at the last Exeter UFO conference, and he blew me away. Before Sirius came out, for those of you who aren't familiar, Sirius was put on... actually, I think Stephen would know a lot about the people associated with the movie Sirius, but the movie Sirius documentary came out a little over a year ago, and it had a small alien body, which was found in the Chilean desert, I believe.
And it was about 12 or 14 inches long?
Not even that.
8 inches long. 6 or 7. Very small.
What's interesting is, the mass media gets out and they say that, it's human DNA. But the truth behind everything is that when you sequence DNA and you test something like that, just like any other computer program, it's only going to sequence what it understands. So if it doesn't fit into human DNA, then it goes into this trash bag of basically unfound. And what they didn't report was so much of it was unfound DNA, they couldn't sequence it. And that's the part that the media didn't talk about.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting, really.
Yeah, so it's part human. They do know that, though, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely part
The
human.
reason I bring it up is because with Mr. Dolan, I actually got to know him at that Exeter. He showed me before anybody else had seen it the actual x-rays on his computer.
That is so
And it was quite interesting. I was with Kathleen Marden, and he showed both of us a lot of that. So quite a nice guy.
And subsequent to that, it came out on the internet, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's where I became familiar with it. So at what point did you start putting it together that perhaps we're blends of different species from elsewhere?
There were 4 things that came together in my mind, which was the incredibly rapid rate of progress in science and biotechnology. And if you extrapolate that even a few hundred years, we'd be capable of engineering ourselves.
Yes. We've advanced exponentially.
In other words, and we've already, we didn't even know what DNA was 50 years ago. And we've already sequenced it and are doing genetic modifications, which is
we're cloning animals, so
subject, but we're doing it.
We're doing it quite well.
We're there, and the evidence that there are other races in our galaxy has gone from very likely to overwhelming in the last few years, just because of the number of habitable planets
that they're finding,
that have been found, and that's running into the hundreds of millions of habitable planets in this galaxy alone. And the 4th thing that got me going was that our minds seem to have much more power than they actually use.
Yeah.
And that makes you think about evolution and who's been screwing around with our DNA to limit us in so many ways. Because when you look at people like people with Savant syndrome who can do remarkable things with memory and piano.
And one section of their brain is really working.
Yeah. And these are damaged brains, but they're doing these incredible things. And the implication is that we could all do them if we just knew how to make the right
That's right, the right connections.
There's a young man in England that they can fly over England with a helicopter, and he can draw from memory a perfect detailed outline of every single building perfectly laid and where everybody was.
Oh, being in the plane. He has
from going over one swoop in a plane, and it's quite amazing to see. Like, what he's talking about is the human brain has the ability to do things that a lot of people can't do, and if you look at those examples, like what Stephen's talking about, and it's really clearly outlined, the potential for the human being's mind is just, it's far surpasses anything that we see in everyday life.
And that's about 10% that we're using, isn't that right? They've determined it's 10%.
Depends on who you ask.
It depends on who you ask. I've heard anything from 5 to
7,
20 or 30. I mean, it's maybe one day we'll know exactly, but it's certainly a small percentage.
All right, well, hold that thought. We have an ad right here, an underwriter. Programming on Portsmouth Community Radio is made possible by you, our members, and by the Music Hall, an American treasure for the arts. It's the Seacoast Performing Arts Center that entertains 100,000 patrons annually on Chestnut Street, Portsmouth. Schedule and other information at themusichall.org.
We just do have to pay the light bills every now and then. Otherwise, it's going to go dark in here.
Okay, Stephen, you're on.
We're back.
You want me to light the place up? What? Oh. Let's see, where were we?
We were talking about the 10% of the brain.
Oh, yeah, the percentage of the brain. And when you tie that into the thoughts about evolution, then you have to ask yourself, why would these capabilities not show up? Why is our memory so unreliable? Why do we lock our keys in the car? I mean, obviously we know they're in the car.
Yep.
We know we wouldn't want to do that, but we do it anyway. What is that? Why is that a survival characteristic?
My wife's still trying to get me to shut the door to the fridge.
Well, we all have our little,
We have our quirks, our idiosyncrasies there, Chuck. But do you suppose it's due to the fact that perhaps sections of the DNA have been, switched off?
Switched off or interfered with?
Well, definitely.
There is, somebody published a paper indicating that some large section of our DNA appeared to have, I think the word they used was sideways insertion. So many groupings of, you seen that one?
I haven't. I find it absolutely so remarkable having this conversation, because I was actually just listening to Mary Rodwell. You're familiar with her around this? Mary Rodwell is the head of CERN through Australia, who does a lot of the abduction research and works with kids that believe they're star children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So she has been working with these kids that come into life or at an early age talk about this stuff, and they say, I don't like living here. I grew up, I don't mind when I don't learn as much at this school as I do at the school when they take me through walls and take me into space. And and what's interesting is her research has been talking a lot about one of the co-founders of DNA all those years ago said in his explanation that he believes some of our DNA is alien, and that's in a quote of his explanation of.
And who was this, and when was that?
One of the co-founders of the DNA, one of the people that because multiple people
on the Genome Project? Is that what you're referring to?
No, the discoverers of DNA. We're talking over 40 years ago.
Okay, because that's quite a while back.
And that was a quote, and I'd have to get the name. I forget the name, but I was just listening to the lecture from Mary Rodwell on the way here, in fact. And, it's really interesting. Last 40 years, you look at the development, like what Stephen was just saying, of human beings. And when they researched the development and the IQs of children, over the last 40 years, the increase was far surpassing any other time in history that they've ever looked at that. So there's a lot of evidence to show DNA can and has been tampered with, like what Stephen's saying, I think.
Yeah.
Enhanced or whatever.
This sideways insertion is unique, and I guess it looked as if it hadn't followed the usual course of gradual development, but it was all of a sudden, boom, it was there. It just didn't fit the pattern of the way the rest of it had evolved and developed.
Well, how is that being categorized? Kind of like chemically? Is it the chemical makeup, or is it the molecular makeup?
Well, if you think of the double spiral,
the sections of the ladder?
It looks as if some piece was just sort of jammed in there.
Oh.
That's what they mean by a sideways insertion. It just didn't seem to fit the structure in a sensible way. And I'm not enough of a bioscientist to really go into any more detail than that, but it's all fascinating, and there's just all of these pieces of these indicators that somebody did, and I don't call it interference. I like to use the term assisted evolution.
Assisted evolution,
not creation, not whatever,
some genetic manipulation kind of spurring us along.
Yeah.
Well, what about Richard Dawkins, his theory, and how does his theory? You're familiar with him. You mentioned him in your book.
He's an Oxford man. Do we really want to talk about?
Oh well, I was just going to say, Oxford's not good, huh? I was wondering how his theory compares to Darwin's, because they both seem to be pretty much the same. in that there's sort of natural selection and things sort of just kind of phase out or fall by the wayside if they have no purpose or use. So, like, whales have the vestiges of legs, and I think dolphins have in their fins what look like hands. Their bone structures look like hands. So they're vestigial, as you had mentioned. So it seems that the natural law and evolution has phased these things out. But when you look at us, we only use 3% of our DNA. 97% of it is uncoded. So why is it that some of this DNA structure hasn't fallen by the wayside? I mean, why is it still there? And why are we only using that small percent?
More that we just don't understand how that 97% works.
Well, that could be part of it.
I find that very hard to believe that only 3% of it is functional. That seems
it's hard to believe.
Odd.
Are we that stupid?
I think what's interesting is, you talk about, and we always look at a lot of these UFO sightings, or let's just talk about, close encounters where people have abductions, that they have relationships, and make reports of having relationships with other beings. Actually, every single one that I've ever heard of deals with telepathy or some sort of either mind control or hypnotism, something that we see many people today either say that they have or demonstrate in some way. So you look at these things and you almost wonder if that isn't part of that evolution. And it goes without saying that a lot of these aliens, whether they be grays or whatever, if you look at a lot of the drawings, they have almost no mouths. Because if
they don't talk,
it's telepathy. If you listen to all of these reports from people today, and they all say the same thing, which is they talk to me through my mind.
Yep, through my mind.
Maybe if we keep going on that path, what a lot of people refer to as, nonsense, which could be telepathy, that some people are developing today. There's lots of reports of people that can do that. You go, Mutant Messages from Down Under was an amazing book that, while I haven't read it, everybody that tells me that they've read it says it's just absolutely amazing. It's about a woman that goes to the outback. First thing that they do, the Aborigine tribe, is they burn all her clothes and say, "You're free." And they communicate using telepathy the whole way while they do a walkabout. And, supposedly this is a real book. So let's just say that we did really use that part of our brain or develop those things. Maybe we'd be closer to what all these reports of people having of, alien contact of, they talked to me through their mind, they went through walls, they did all of these things. Maybe that's where we're going with that other 97.
Well, the fruit fly uses 83% of its DNA. That 17% that it doesn't use is compared to our 97%. So there is sort of an indication that we've been manipulated.
Yeah.
Maybe that doesn't really follow. It follows in my head. But
my wife's got fruit fly traps up all around the house right now, so that doesn't invest too well for humanity.
They're pretty clever. She shouldn't be killing those little beings.
Too funny.
This message is from Down Under. Who did you say that was by?
I would have to look up the name of that, but I could talk to you off air a little bit about it if you're interested. Yeah. It's an interesting book.
I have read it. I'm not sure that I still have it, though. Yeah, it was a fascinating book.
So, since you believe that we've been genetically assisted, who do you feel has been helping us along?
Well, my feeling is there have been lots of them, but the most recent appears to have been the so-called Anunnaki, who worked with the ancient Sumerians.
And about 200,000 years ago, is that the period you're talking?
And it's if you buy into what Zecharia Sitchin researched, they did do some serious genetic work with, first of all, bringing probably the Neanderthal man and developing him to the point where he could be a worker in their gold and tin mines, and then later on disagreeing among themselves as to whether the humans should be allowed to evolve further and develop some sentience. And so that engineering was actually done, and
so but Stephen, do you know it was who said it was Neanderthal and not necessarily Cro-Magnon?
that seems to be Sitchin's
That was
thought,
kind of Sitchin.
but the evidence for that is not great.
I know it isn't. There are a lot
But
of things, a lot of holes in these books that they'll focus on certain things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking clay tablets that were
Right, very
written
old.
probably quite a while after whatever happened. So it's going to be vague. It's going to be, but it's and not all that vague. It's pretty clear if you read the books.
Well, what appears to be still a mystery to me is they were mining the gold from South Africa. So apparently they were genetically modifying people or beings down there. Now, it's not clear to me who that root race or that original tribe was. Was it a tribe of like African blacks, or was it Cro-Magnon, or was it Neanderthal? Who was it that they were manipulating? It's not clear to me.
No, it's not. It's not really clear from the books either, and I'm not sure we could expect it to be. Maybe with more research, but
well, who the Anunnaki? What is your interpretation of what they looked like? Were they white? Were they giants?
According to Sitchin, they were certainly very tall,
Very
like
tall.
15 feet or so.
Okay.
Elongated heads.
Yes, they almost look like some of the Egyptian hieroglyphs and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
All right, then if they were that tall, how is it that in the Bible, in Genesis, it is mentioned that the Nephilim walked the earth in those days, and the sons of God saw the daughters of men and thought they were fair, and they intermarried. So how would, a 5.5-foot person mate with a 16-foot tall being? So
Very painfully.
well, I've been thinking about that.
Is that what you've been doing all day?
That's
Sitting
what
around
I've been thinking
that?
about.
Well, maybe they did the whole thing.
Suddenly, this show took a drastic turn.
Maybe it was all in vitro. I
Well,
mean,
that's another.
Step
well,
ladder, maybe?
the Bible indicates that there was
Interbreeding.
interbreeding,
Yep.
exactly, rather than test tube.
Well, it also talks about how they were shunned, almost like fallen angels, as a
That's
result
true
of that.
too.
So you look at this, and you can read into anything, I think, with ancient texts that are that old. But a lot of people point to that and they say, well, these are the original demons, or this is how Satan came to be. I think it depends on the lens that you're using to interpret information. If you don't tend to be a religious person, you could say, oh, well, I don't know what that is. Or you could say it's UFOs or aliens. It really just depends on that lens. But, a lot of people do write about the Nephilim and how they bred with women, and it's really interesting. I think that the story of Enoch is probably one of the most interesting stories out there when it comes to this stuff.
Well, do you want to elucidate?
I could try a little bit. Help me out with this a little bit, Stephen. I'm sure you're a little familiar with it, but Enoch, if I am correct, was the great-grandfather of Noah. And he was taken up on a ship, essentially. And there are some writings. Enoch's only mentioned in the Bible once, but there are lost passages that you can research on the internet. And Eric von Daniken talks extensively about that in his book, Chariots of the Gods, the 1969 book that pretty much blew everything out of the water and started all the ancient alien talk.
Where do you suppose he got that information if he's talking about it extensively?
It's out there. It's just not something that was all put into the Bible.
Okay.
What he says is a lot of it just wasn't put in because when the Bible was put together, they didn't know where a lot of that fit in. So they just kind of left it out. But essentially, it's all there still if one wants to look at it. And, it talks around him going up into the heavens, met with God, was coated with some sort of a coating on his body, was given what was called a reeve of quick writing to learn, and later ended up going up and coming back down so much of a time later. And after Noah's father said, I don't think that this is my son, he was told to go to see Enoch, and Enoch said, he's not your son, his father is from the heavens. So led to even more credence to the whole story of Noah being that Noah's father wasn't a human.
Yeah.
Wow, I hadn't heard that whole story. Whoa. Well, we can talk more about interbreeding in the second half of the hour. We've reached the bottom of the hour right now, and we're going to take a short break for a couple of minutes, and then we'll be right back.
Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. 3, 2. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You really made a grade, and the papers want to know whose shirts you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in the most peculiar way. And the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
Okay, welcome back to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM in Portsmouth's West End. And another announcement from the community calendar from the Seacoast Repertory Theatre. The Seacoast Repertory Theatre is dedicated to the presentation of professional theatre production and to the education of the region's young people. Ushers are needed for the main stage and youth productions on evenings and weekends. Volunteers will work with a variety of people, backgrounds, and ages. For further information, contact Judy Curry, Marketing Director, at 603-433-4793, or at Judy, that's Judi, at seacoastrep.org. And Lynn, do you have some upcoming guests for us?
Yeah, starting with August 9th, we're welcoming Audrey Hewins, who is the founder of Starborn Support, and she'll be joining us with her sister via Skype on the 9th. Starborn is a group created to assist and provide emotional support to people worldwide who feel they've experienced an extraterrestrial alien abduction or encounter. On August 16th, we're pleased to welcome back our good friend Jeremy D'Entremont, who is founder of the Friends of the Portsmouth Lighthouses. Jeremy will once again be joining us in the studio with his wonderful tales of haunted lighthouses along the East Coast of New England. On August 23rd, we will be having an open discussion here in the studio. On August 30th, joining us in the studio will be paranormal investigator Shane Soroyce. And Willie, would you like to tell us about what Shane is going to be doing?
I would love to tell you about that.
If you were prepared.
And yes, I'm looking for the paper right now. And
okay, well,
it is
I will skip
the True Paranormal Event 2014,
okay.
A celebration of advanced understanding in the paranormal field. And that is going to be September 20th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Brookline Event Center in Brookline, New Hampshire. And a couple of the guests that are going to be speaking there, let's see, recent guest we had was Paul and Ben Eno,
Right.
And
William
an upcoming guest that we're going to have is William Hall, and he also will be speaking there.
And his book title is The Most Haunted House in the World. The world's most haunted house, and not in America. I got that clarified.
We extended
both
it to the
screwed up.
world. Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's cool. I
Yeah.
like that. Okay. And also, Spirit Radio will be there at this event.
Yes, we'll have a table
there.
Yep.
So come on by and say hi.
And let me just mention, on the 6th of September, Roxy Zwicker, who is a local author of many books on ghosts and spirit legends of the Seacoast area, will be joining us for her second appearance, and she's going to share some of the ghostly stories of the Portsmouth area with us. So be sure to join us then too. Now, we've got an email from Dave from Daytona, and this kind of...
Our buddy Dave from Daytona Beach, Florida. Huh?
he
We haven't heard from him
contacts
for a
us
while.
every once in a while. This has to do with cattle mutilations, and the reason I feel that it's relative is because there's a lot of thought out there going around that the mutilations have something to do with genetic manipulation, or who knows, maybe they need our blood. Maybe there's a close relationship between cattle and humans, I'm not sure. But the question is, do you think cattle mutilations could be black ops weapons testing as opposed to aliens interested in our DNA?
Well,
So-
Great question. Is that an open? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Field that one.
Well, I cannot conceive that somebody who was smart enough to get here from however many hundred
Would be
light-
interested
light
in our
years
cattle?
would need to cut cattle or cats or
Hmm.
anything up. I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense. So the Black Ops theory really resonates with me.
But even if it were black ops, what do you suppose the purpose in it would be?
They're testing them,
For-
testing weapons to see if they work.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, that's, I guess that's a
These
possibility.
cattle mutilations are so precision. You're talking like maybe laser weapons
Something
or something.
like it. Yeah, laser would certainly do it.
Yeah, because they say that they're like surgical.
Truly, but
yeah.
it's usually like the tongue, the throat, or the anus,
It's usually-
or sexual organs.
Yeah,
so
it's the sexual
it's-
organs, the tongue, the mouth.
It's very
the genitals,
specific.
the anus. Those are the areas that get cut out with laser precision. No
Yeah,
blood.
so-
Predators don't do that.
No,
And
predators don't do that.
Strange Harvest came out in 1982. Anybody
Moulton
interested?
Howe.
Linda Moulton Howe is it was the expert. I mean, this is what blew all of this open.
Yeah.
There's a long history of this. Whatever it was a higher technology of what was being used, and her documentary from '82 really explained and documented a lot of these cases that were going on in the Midwest.
What is your take on the interest in hurting the cattle? What do you think they want?
I mean, I've listened. You know, I can't say that I have a theory or this or that. I just know that there's some great documentaries out there. Some people do believe that cattle mutilation has to do with UFOs. Bottom line is this: is that it's still a mystery. It still happens today. It's being done with laser precision, and it has been since the early '80s and late
True.
'70s. And back then, lasers were not what they are today. So you have to keep in mind that back then this was going on with the technology that wasn't ample for society. Again, whatever it is, there were very specific parts of those cows that were being used and still do be used. So I don't really have theories, and I don't like to speculate on it, but one has to really be asleep to think that there isn't something else going on.
Yeah, there's something else going on. It's hard to say exactly what. As you know, if it is the Greys, and they are suspect, they have purportedly bred out emotion out of their physicality, and they do not sexually reproduce. They're all test tube babies. That's what happens. So the word is that they're trying to understand the sexuality of the animals, but I don't quite understand the connection with the cattle.
So what's the evidence for their having bred out their...
A lot of what John E. Mack has to say, Raymond Fowler. I just read another book recently, too, that talked about their emotions having been bred out, as well as their sexuality.
that's just one race, right? We're talking.
Just one race that we're talking about, right?
Races? I mean, there would have to be a whole spectrum of capabilities and agendas and methods and everything across, from super advanced to not much ahead of us.
Well, supposedly they are a dying race. They're far ahead of us, but they're a dying race because they bred out the emotionality.
That makes no sense either, because if they're smart enough to interfere with our DNA, they would certainly be able to do whatever they want with theirs. So how could they be dying out? That doesn't make sense to me either.
Apparently they can't replicate.
I don't know. It just doesn't, in my head, it
doesn't make any sense to you.
If that, even as little as 100,000 years ahead of us, and that's nothing in cosmic terms.
Well, apparently they cannot spiritually advance.
Spiritually?
Yep. They're not sentient, and they can't spiritually advance.
Probably too many.
According to who?
Watching too many episodes of the Kardashians, probably.
Yeah. According to the abductees that are trying to explain why they're being contacted.
I mean, I think it's really hard when we get into those conversations, because then we get stuck with, well, this person reports, therefore, and that's John Mack's opinion. I don't know how he gets that
Not really even his
information.
opinion. It's just the information that repeatedly comes up in his interviews of abductees. Him and Raymond Fowler.
There's a lot of people that believe that grays are us from the future. So,
well, there's that, and there's the idea that, in my head, something like 80 or maybe even 90% of the abductions are, again, our own military playing with their new toys.
Yeah,
and so
I think that could be an element.
Stuff that's planted in people's heads could be any kind of garbage that those guys dream up to confuse us. And they're doing a hell of a job, because we're all confused.
Yeah, we are. Is there someone?
It is effective what they're doing. I don't know if you want to get into the conditioning stuff.
Yeah, I do. Before we just mention that real quickly, what other races do you think are involved in our genetic manipulation?
I don't know.
You don't?
It's clearly several, or maybe many, doing different experiments, and some of them, you almost think they have a sense of humor when they come up with an animal like a peacock. I mean,
I still think the duck-billed platypus is quite the animal.
Well, yeah.
Well, the anteater.
You think of some, a galactic graduate student with some artistic ability and a
sense of humor.
Sense of humor, yeah.
I mean, funny enough, you even look at Hollywood today, and a movie just came out yesterday called Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's the new Marvel Comics movie, and I just went to go see it today, and they've got a new character called Rocket Raccoon. And he's a raccoon that in outer space somebody was messing with his DNA, and he's now like a bounty hunter. You know what I mean? So, even Hollywood mimics some of the stuff that we talk about even though this is a serious conversation, and some people are going to hear this and go, geez, manipulating creatures. But, I mean, this is something that's been talked about and been joked around about, but, this is a pretty serious conversation.
Is that in cartoon form?
Actually, no, it's quite the movie.
Ah.
Yeah, it's quite the movie, and I will recommend it to anybody that loves Marvel movies. It's one of the best I've ever seen.
I'll have to see that. Yeah. Well, Chuck, how about you, real quickly? Who do you believe may be involved in the genetic manipulation?
You say believe, and for me, I don't have any belief in it, because I don't have a dog in the fight.
Okay, what do you feel?
What do I think? I don't know. I think...
what do you think is possible?
Anything's possible in this
But what
world.
do you think?
That's a hard question. I've read a lot of books, and I tend to think that there's a lot to genetic manipulation myself. Do I know for a fact? No, I don't. Do I feel? Do I trust some of the people that say that they've had these conversations? I'd like to believe them. A lot of people talk around, what we call grays or zeta reticuli being almost robotic sometimes, and that they
are. Some of them are.
Yeah, that's what I hear. and that they're just carrying out tasks for other races, and that a lot of races have agendas, and those agendas are specifically around the manipulation of human DNA. So, some people talk about, like David Icke talks about reptilians, which is the 10th largest conspiracy theory in the world today, according to Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory show. You've got the Greys, which are probably the alien that everybody talks about and sees on the cover of books like Communion from 1986, which was a bestseller. But not a lot of people talk about other races like Pleiadians or the Arcturians. Or what do I think? I don't know. I just know that there's a lot of people out there that have written books around what they call Greys manipulating and abducting people. So it's quite interesting, really.
Well, I like the idea that I've heard from, I think, Stephen Greer, among others, that the human form, the 2 arms, 2 legs, this bipedal structure is very, very widespread.
It is.
Not only in this galaxy, but all over the place. And that explains a lot, if it's true. The Greys are humanoid. Some of them may be sentient. Some of the tall Greys, for instance, appear to be in leadership roles, whereas the smaller ones do appear to be.
They're supposed to be robotic, and that they have some kind of bio chip in their head that directs them.
Servants.
Robotic.
Or robotic minions of the whoever.
So why do you suppose it's all being suppressed? I have my opinion, but I'd like to know what both of you fellows believe.
Well, I guess this would be a really good segue, if you don't mind me kind of talking about. I just think one of my passions today is really about how is it that the public really understands information. I'm really passionate about this because I think that, so many people understand that the media is controlled today. We've got 5 major medias, where in the 70s we used to have over 33 different media outlets. And when you look at that, all of that information is being funneled through 5 corporations today.
Yeah.
And just starting there was an ABC poll done within the last 2 years. That poll said that out of 100%, 36% of Americans believe in UFOs. 11% think that they've seen something. 17% don't believe it at all. And the rest, they literally don't have an opinion, or are still, the jury's still out on.
And who took that poll?
That was an ABC poll that was done in conjunction with a major magazine. What was it? National Geographic.
Okay.
Yep. So that was the most recent serious poll that was taken, and that's more than 1/3 of the public believes in UFOs, and over 11% say that they've seen one.
Okay, and that is only one poll. I mean, there are other polls that have been taken from different sources.
I've heard polls where over 50% of the polls say that they've seen UFOs.
Yeah.
It's hard telling. I'm not the one taking the poll, but, that's National Geographic and ABC as of 2012.
Okay. Then what do you think about the social conditioning, Stephen?
It seems to be very widespread, and it's really difficult to get people to talk about any of this.
I know. People just don't want to be taken as loony.
And,
when it could be very scientific.
Frustrating. I mean, the thinking portion of the public, which is not as large as we would like to be, but it's still a lot of people, been in the last few years been shrinking and being constrained to just go from one day to the next because they're worried about their jobs and their
I have people come up to me all the time saying that they see things, and they know who I am, so they come up to me. I've got friends of my family that every time they see me go, Chuck, you wouldn't believe it, we were in Ossipee Lake in New Hampshire last weekend, and my whole family was on the lake, and we saw these 2 orange globes fly up over the lake, spin around, do this dance, and go over the mountaintops in separate directions.
Wow, I bet that was impressive.
Yeah, and this is happening all the time, especially in the hot spots of New Hampshire, especially around the White Mountains, Ossipee Lake, Exeter area. These are hotbeds of UFO activity.
I know it. We do have a message here. Rob from London, and he says, I'm convinced our Stonehenge was designed by extraterrestrials. And he says, what say you Yanks? And I think that's if the Nephilim were giants, I think that they might have gave out a few lessons.
I'll give you my opinion on this one because I do have one. My opinion is that we have these energetic lines. They're called ley lines, and they go around the whole world. And these are just energy lines that have been used probably for as long as the planet's been there. And there's some great books written over ley lines. And some people that I talk to say that it's not by coincidence that most UFO sightings happen where these ley lines are. So a lot of people talk about ley lines being right on Stonehenge. So to me, these energetic patterns that are being followed through the course of this
They were
Earth,
known a long time ago.
They've been known for a long time.
Plus the immensity of these stones and how difficult it would be to move them. I think it's beyond the technology that we've got now. So I think Rob is probably right. And thank you, Rob from London, for writing that into us.
Yeah, we just came back from England, and we didn't see Stonehenge this time, but we did see Avebury, which is even more impressive to me.
Oh, how so?
Than, because it's so much larger. It's a drive-through ring.
Ooh.
It's about half a mile in diameter. It's fortified with a
moats,
and a ditch.
Yes.
Except the ditch is on the wrong side of the wall. It's as if you're trying to stop people getting out. There's a pub and a whole little village in the ring. And it has this feeling about it, and my partner here, Kathy, really felt it.
And what is it you feel? Kathy, would you like to tell us what you felt?
Well, I think I felt in supreme connection, actually, through my feet to the earth. It was very noticeable upon first entering. There's something that almost stopped me and made me realize that I was about to enter, a most unusual place. And, I can still feel, how I felt then.
Was it like a vibration that you sensed through your feet?
Yes, it was, but it was deeper than a vibration.
Oh,
it was
okay.
a warmth. It was more than just a vibration. It was deep and a sense of connection.
Wow.
So it's really quite amazing.
Oh, you're lucky. I would love to go.
They're waiting for you.
I do have to mention we're running really short here. We have about 3 minutes left.
Well, okay then, Stephen, real quickly, would you like to tell us about CE5?
Well, CE5 is Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which means that they are initiated by humans rather than the other way around.
And this is connecting with ETs.
Connecting with ETs, and Dr. Stephen Greer, as part of the CSETI organization, does offer trainings in how to do this, and I've been on a couple of them.
Do you feel they've been successful?
Well, I had some experiences myself, so yes. Actually, on the last training I did, there were 3 different experiences that really made me maybe this is 3 different races. I mean, they were totally different in character.
Really?
One was I saw an orb approaching me across a little lagoon, about a basketball-sized orb.
And what color was it? Was it white or orange?
It was grayish. It was grayish. And then there was a feeling of presence there, and later on we were encouraged to contact this being and ask them if anything was going to happen the following night. In other words, predict something. When would it occur, and what part of the sky would it be in? And I got midnight, and I got 7 minutes past midnight, and I got due north in both cases. And things happened both those times in that direction. So it's much more persuasive when you predict something and it happens rather than something that's already happened.
Oh, that's neat to get
and
confirmation.
You're trying to explain it. Very different. Much more believable and much more...
more powerful, I think. Yeah. And that was just one experience?
Well, that's 2. The orb. There was the orb.
The orb,
and
okay.
And then the predicting, using that being to predict what was happening the following night. And the third one was that I saw Dr. Greer standing on the beach. He was, looking across at a grassy patch, and he didn't appear to be doing anything. But what I saw right in front of him was a an object about 7 feet high that looked like an old tree trunk. Except that I checked later, there's nothing there. And he didn't see it. I said, I saw something over there.
Did it look like a shadow?
He said, I felt something, but I didn't see anything. And that's what's so wild about all of this. Not everybody sees everything.
At the same time and experiences the same
some
thing.
of the things everybody saw, and some of the things were just unique to individuals.
And I'll leave us with this: is everybody talks about UFOs coming from other galaxies. Let's not forget there's such thing as dimensions, time, and all sorts of other factors that could be going on at any given time.
Yes.
And that brings us into another show.
As a matter of fact, that's what we spoke about last week. Very true.
And speaking of time,
I think we're about out of it.
we're
The sands
out
of time have
again.
run out.
The sands of time.
Yes, sands of time, yeah.
All right, cool. So, Chuck and Stephen, we thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Joining us once again.
That was
thank
a lot
you,
of fun.
Kathy.
And thank you for asking us.
And I guess that takes care of
Another evening,
another evening of Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience.
And thank you all for listening.
And we will be back again next week. The wrong button.